first and foremost, thank you for joining the show. I appreciate that.
Oh, I'm excited to be here, Ken.
Yeah. And we were catching up before, and this is possibly the worst time in human history that we could try and schedule this. So thank you for being gracious with your time and joining.
No, it's all good.
Yeah. So, in the intro, I give a little overview as to your athletic background. And I got to be honest, there's a lot of things I knew about your background, right? Like, the multiple Olympics, three different Olympics, right? 2000, yes. 2004, 2008, which is insane. But there was a lot of stuff that I didn't realize that was really fascinating. So if we could even just start helping orient folks with your athletic background, could you talk a little bit about how you kind of got into shot putting specifically?
Sure. So like a lot of kids growing up in the 80s, I guess, we were outside all the time. I played 4 sports a year, all seasonal. When my family moved to Virginia, my dad took a job with the government for 2 years, and we'd been in Georgia. And before that, and we moved up there for 2 years. And when we moved back, I went to a private school there, and actually the school that I'll be the AD at. I love it. And when so
you went to Love It?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was. We'll touch on that later. It was
okay.
It was an interesting story how that opportunity kind of came about. But
yeah.
So I was in 8th grade and I played football. I had a huge growth spurt my 8th grade year. I started off my 8th grade year at like 5'5" or 5'6", and maybe 135 or 140 pounds. Then started my freshman year, a year later at effectively 5'10", 5'11", 205 pounds. So massive growth spurt. My parents hated me because I was eating so much. But
are your folks are they like, was that expected? Like, are your parents big?
My dad is about 6 feet tall, and I think in college he probably weighed 190 or 200.
Okay, so this was a little bit of a surprise.
Some big people. Well, I'm only 6 feet tall, so but either way, my dad was athletic. He played college football. He actually started as a center at a SEC school at 185 pounds. So I don't know how he did that, but it was a slightly different time. But even in the late 60s, 185 pounds was pretty small.
What's funny is we have a good family friend who played at Yale back when Yale was like really competitive at the division level. Well, yeah. And he was an O lineman, and he couldn't have been. There's no way he was over 200 pounds.
Yeah.
And I think I somehow got a hold of like the program for I was like Yale Harvard back in 1960 or something. It was like the whole O line was under 200.
Yeah.
It was just a different game.
They did play a different game back then, and the offensive linemen did more than shielding. That's for sure. Positional blocks were a last ditch effort.
Yeah,
and usually ended up with a leg whip of some sort. Try to break somebody's thigh.
Right.
But yeah, so it was 8th grade, and I'd always played football, basketball, baseball, did swimming, things like that. But at this time, I was going to focus on football, basketball, and baseball. Mm-hmm. Basketball, I got cut. I ended up going out for wrestling, which was a great gift as well that year. And then I went out for baseball, and it was like day one of. Sorry, my daughter just woke up. They don't have school today.
Hey, I'd be doing the same.
She's going to say hello. This is my daughter, Lolo.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good.
You can hear him kind of? Okay.
Yeah, right. Sorry if I'm a little loud.
No, you're good.
What grade would you be in if school hadn't just been canceled?
She's in 3rd grade right now, but she's excited to be going into 4th grade at the new school here.
That's awesome.
Can you go get your breakfast and everything ready?
Where's mommy?
She's at the grocery store. I'm on a podcast here. This is being recorded. Yeah. So you're going to go viral with this. You're going to be
famous.
Okay.
This is where it all started.
So sorry about that. So I go out for baseball my 8th grade year, and it's like day 1 or day 2 of tryouts, and I thought I'd done really well. I wasn't a great baseball player relative to some of the guys, but I was a good athlete and thought I had a pretty good arm, and he could hit pretty well. And the coach at the time, a guy named Tim Schaefer, Coach Schaefer calls me into his office. He's the varsity coach, and he's overseeing all the tryouts for 7th through 12th grade. And he calls me in, and Coach Schaefer had a stutter and some real weird anxiety, social. It wouldn't look you in the eye, kind of thing.
Oh yeah,
and
I know the type.
He kind of looked at me and says, "Nelson, you need to sit down." And I thought he was going to give me the attaboy, like, you're new to the school, you're doing great, keep working hard. These are the areas you need. He goes, Adam, you're just not good enough. You're never going to be good enough. You're not going to. There's basically saying there's in the sort of most direct way possible, you suck. And right. And baseball's not in your future. He went on to sort of punctuate that statement by saying, even if you went and played with one of the club teams, so there's, at the time, East Cobb was a big baseball team. It was the only baseball club team in Georgia that I knew of at the time. This is like 1988, 89. And he said, even if you went and played year round, I don't think there'd be a spot for you on this team. And that was his way of saying, you need to find something else. Or focus on football.
This is before the era of constructive criticism.
Yeah, there was no redirection. There was no,
right.
Hey, look, these are the things you need to work on. Let's sit down and develop a plan for that. It was your gene pool just limits you on what you're going to do.
And so insane.
Yeah. So I thought that this was fine because I was going to go out. I wanted to play football anyway. And I wanted to be the first freshman to ever play varsity football at my school. And so I went home and I told my dad, I said, Dad, I got cut from baseball today, but that's okay because I'm going to start training for football. And my dad was like, or you could get a job or go out for another sport. He just, firmly believed that boys without structure is just a recipe for disaster.
And I think there's probably some truth to that.
Yeah. And so I ended up, I thought I was pulling a fast one on him. The track team had a no cut policy, and the track team was also coached by the football coach. So I figured it's basically like training for football. So that's how I got started.
No kidding.
A ton of different, I did 10 different events, everything from the shot put to the pole vault to the mile. I did the 800 meters until my sophomore year in high school. Ran my last 800 at 215 pounds. And I remember looking up at my coach saying, I'm never doing that again. And at that point, I think I was large enough that he said, okay. So that's how it all started.
Okay. That's awesome. It's funny. So I was just talking with, Eric Hosmer. He's the first baseman for the Padres. And what's interesting is he ended up specializing fairly early. In baseball. And I asked him, I was like, clearly it worked out. I was like, but given, the chance to go back, like, is that something that you would do again? And he was like, no. He's like, I'm totally against specializing early. He's like, unless you get towards basically like the end of high school and it appears there's a real opportunity that you need to like hone in on. He's like, but other than that, he's like, there's such a benefit from like exposure to so many different sports. I mean, so I guess I'll toss that to you. Like, not only did you play multiple sports, but you did multiple events within track. Like, is it fair to say that was definitely like, helpful in your progression as an athlete?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I did football, wrestling, and track all through high school. Football was sort of the foundation of like all of my training, and for the most part until maybe my junior year, and then I bifurcated between football and track, and then wrestling was sort of the connective tissue, if you will. It was the thing that connected the whole seasons. But they all challenge you in different ways. So, you look at football is multi-directional, lots of different hand-eye coordination, dealing with impacts, absorbing impacts and things like that. Wrestling is more, to me, there's some hand-eye coordination elements to it, but for the most part, it's the best sport on the planet for getting kids comfortable with uncomfortable. You cannot, there's nothing you can, even if you're a really bad wrestler, you can't go in there and just go easy. There's no way to do it.
So
every
every day is adversity.
every day is adversity. And, you know, I was fortunate enough or unfortunate enough to wrestle heavyweight, I suppose, for all 4 years in high school. But I'll tell you this, like, even if you really suck and you're not the starting wrestler for your team, there is nothing quite like having someone who's 245 pounds try to squish you every single day. And like your job, your role in that, it's one of the few individual sports that is really, you can't excel at it without a great group of people to practice with. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
Even like boxing and some martial arts, like you can get pretty good at different elements of the game on your own. Yeah. Now, you can't get to be a great fighter without someone else to spar against, but with wrestling, you can't do any of it other than just general conditioning. So I love that sport in that regard. And I think people that are great wrestlers or identify themselves as wrestlers, former wrestlers or whatever, have a certain unique quality to drive hard and also work well with teams, because that's what the nature of that sport is. And then track and field it's the personal challenge. Right. I could go out and have my best game ever in football and still lose the game. Yeah. And nobody would ever notice, but I could show measured improvement every single time I stepped out. So, and from my perspective, the three sports gave me everything that I needed to sort of succeed, if you will, or feed my ambitions. I had the team elements of football and the general athleticism. I had wrestling, which taught me how to embrace the suck, if you will. Yeah. And then track and field, which gave me it's the same thing that makes the weight room intoxicating and addictive to people, is that instant feedback loop. I know I got better today. And it was, so for me, it was a great mixtures of sports. I forget what question I was actually answering now, but I mean, I completely agree in so many ways. Because, there's a lot of folks who listen and reach out and actually have young kids, and they're trying to figure out, and it's like being a parent today from an athletic standpoint, it's tough. It's tough to navigate. It's like which opportunities, there's no shortage of travel teams, and the amount of time that parents are being asked to commit, they're trying to figure out where to focus their energy. So I completely agree. I feel like, so for me, I played through high school, football, basketball, and then I ended up dropping baseball my freshman year, and I ended up doing track my let me think about this, my sophomore and my senior year. But I completely agree. It's like each sport, you kind of built off the skills you acquired in one, and it made you better in the other. Like the kids who were playing basketball, who were also on the football team, they just brought a toughness that the other basketball guys didn't have. You know what I mean? Wrestling, I never did, but the one thing I did learn is and this was in college, never pick a fight with a wrestler. Because you're right. There is a certain quality and a comfortability with suck that those guys are willing to go through. You don't want to be in a fight with those guys. So that's great. Oh, and did you make the football team as a freshman? No, we were asked to play up after the JV season. So I think there were two of us. They started asking me to play up or dress out, but no. But I did start as a sophomore. So
okay, yeah. Well, if that's the low light of your athletic career, I think
that's all right.
You did pretty well. Okay, so you end up. I'll jump ahead in the story a little bit if you don't mind. You end up getting pretty good at shot put and pretty good at football. Can you talk a little bit about what that decision was like, as to where you were going to spend your time as you moved up to the collegiate level?
Yeah. So I guess, I don't know. I did my college thing a little bit differently than most kids. Certainly most kids now. Everybody was so stressed about it. And I just decided that if I just took care of business, that the rest of it would figure itself out. Yeah. So I was a good student, and I was a pretty good athlete as well. My senior year, I was all-state in 3 sports and All-American in one of them. So I had a lot of, and then I was also, I did a lot of not just because I enjoyed it. I wasn't trying to beef a resume or application up or anything like that, but I was involved with a lot of the arts as well. Okay. I guess, I don't know, maybe it was the spring of my junior year. My dad and I sat down and had a conversation about schools. And he said, look, you just need to go to the best school that you can get into and still be happy at. And I think that was the guiding message of my whole college search. I hadn't even thought about the Ivies. I mean, the first time I received a recruiting letter from Dartmouth, I think I picked it up and said, where's Dartmouth?
Yeah.
And so it wasn't even on my radar. And then my mom said, hey, we need to go see these schools in the Northeast. So we went to Dartmouth, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, all in one little road trip.
Yeah.
And, at that time, football was still the one that I was being most heavily recruited for. I was recruited for football by the SEC and ACC schools, and was looking at those schools as an option, but they wanted me to just do football. And I just didn't want to do that. We went to this, I remember going to official visit at Clemson, and they took us to the academic center. And this was before, now they're somewhat ubiquitous, but in 1990, we actually did the visit, I think, in 92. Okay. But a lot of schools didn't have these student athlete academic centers. And this was just for their varsity athletics program. It was this giant complex, at least relative to what for me, it seemed huge.
Yeah.
And you go there, and they were going through the tour, and they said, so if you want to do a report on, pick your subject, you tell them what the subject is and what the class and who's the professor. And then they will go to the library and pull all the books for you. And then they will highlight all the relevant, text that you need to read. And then if you need help writing the paper, you can write the paper, and then we'll help you edit it. And, you're thinking about this. I'm like, wow, what do I actually have to do?
Yeah, that's
and look, that's not a knock on those schools. They're doing what they can to support the athletes that they have there. But I don't know. It just seemed like it seemed to go against the whole the notion of going to college in the first place. So then I started broadening my horizons a little bit and said I wanted to do both football and track, and I was able to cut a lot of schools because they wanted me to focus on one or the other. The wrestling schools were the rest. I was also recruited for wrestling as well.
Oh, okay.
And I quickly dismissed that because I was about 225 pounds my senior year. And that was just like this weird size for college wrestling. I either had to wrestle guys that were going to be natural heavyweights at 265 or 270, or drop down to 191. I was like,
which would just be brutal.
Yeah. So, but then I went on a recruiting visit to Dartmouth, and I was sick as a dog. I had like 103 fever the 2 days I was there. And as a result, I think all the guys that I met, they were like, oh, he's never coming. But I had this awesome time to have these conversations with people. And I remember walking or getting home, and my dad was like, well, how was this? I said, well, Dad, I was sick the whole time I was there. But as a result, I didn't really get a chance to go out and see and meet all the people. But the people that I did meet, I was like, I could be happy here without sports. And he was like, it's a good school. So
yeah.
But yeah, so that's how it went down. And I ended up applying to I don't know, 4 or 5 schools. A couple of them as safety schools just in case. And all of them I would do sports at, but I ended up getting into all of them. And then, so my college decision was really easy. I mean, it was a very different, now people are so you talk to serious athletes now and it's like, oh yeah, I've got this whole plan of how I'm going to get there. And I'm like, yeah, I just need to relax. It takes care of itself if you take care of business. So,
yeah. And, I mean, I remember so let me think about this. I graduated high school 2005, and that was right around the time, I don't even think YouTube had come out yet. So it was still you had to make DVDs and send it to all the schools. You know what I mean? It is stressful, but I remember I had the very same experience where a letter showed up from Princeton and Dartmouth and Yale. And I was like, what is this doing here?
Mm-hmm.
Cause I grew up on the West Coast, North. I mean, I almost grew up closer to Canada than I did Seattle. And it was just, it could not be further from my mind. Like I always like was aware of the Ivy League. I probably couldn't have told you all the schools that were in it, but like I never, in all my athletic pursuits, did I think that like it was going to lead me there. But I kind of had a similar experience, and I think my parents probably also told me, don't be an idiot. So that's how I ended up there as well. But so you go to Dartmouth, you get the opportunity to play both sports. And at the time, so I know you said you were being recruited for football. For you personally, was football still your priority, or did you get the sense that you could really do something special in track?
It was starting to be equal parts, and that was actually the deal that I made with the football coaches, because every football coach that I talked to was very candid about it up front, saying, "Hey, we know you do track, but we're recruiting you for football. We'll let you do track, but you're going to come and do spring football with us, and you have to do our workouts." Yeah. And my deal, one of the reasons why I didn't want to go get an athletic scholarship is they really can't dictate those terms to you. Absolutely. And so I remember sitting down with Coach Lyons, who was the head coach at Dartmouth, like very early on, and they'd said everything that, you say during the recruiting process. Oh yeah, sure, you can do both. And, as long as you don't ask the wrong question, they won't offer up any information that it's going to sway your decision, that causes you to pause at all. Right. And so I sat down with him. I said, Coach, I said, look, and I was very clear with this in the recruiting process. I said, look, I want to do both football and track. And I said, this was before I even got there. I said, in the first sport that says or suggests that I should stop doing one of my other sports for the other sport is a sport that I'll quit. Mm-hmm. And so we had that understanding going into it. And I got there my freshman fall, and everything was fine. And then I was the first freshman to play varsity football in the Ivies, by the way. Right. So no, that's one of the things I looked up, and I was like, oh, damn, I had no idea. Yeah, but that was by virtue of timing rather than anything else. I was the first freshman class that they didn't have freshman football. Okay. And I also was on the kickoff team, and we had the opening kickoff. So, I timed it well. Yeah. But yeah, I did play varsity my freshman year. That's awesome. And so at the end of the season, they said, what's going to go happen with track? I said, well, I'm going to go off of the track season. They said, okay. And they were kind of trying to figure out how this works. Well, a lot of the people that do track, because there are a couple guys that do track and play football, they also do our workouts. I said, well, let me do the track workouts. And they were like, okay, what about spring football? I said, well, if I make the conference championships and the NCAAs, I'm going to go do those. Yeah. Well, you'll still be available for spring football, right? If it doesn't conflict with those. Right. And so they asked a couple of questions my freshman year like that. And then I came out for spring football after my season had ended in track, and I had like a week left. And at the end of spring football, Coach Lyons called me up to his office, and he said, so, what are you thinking? I said, what do you mean, Coach? And he said, well, you really could have benefited from the extra week of football this year. And we want to make sure that we got you in the fold for next year. I said, well, Coach, I know you're not asking me to stop my track for football, are you? And he was like, I think he was shocked that I called him on it. And I said, because if you do that, then I guess I'm just focused on track for the rest of my career here. And he said, no, we're good. We're good. I said, but I tell you what, I'll make a deal with you. If I ever come back, because he wanted me to do their workouts. I said, if I ever come back slower or weaker than anyone in my position, I'll do your workouts. But your workouts do suck. Their workouts were horrible. And I'm getting the sense that you were a very self-secure 18-year-old. Well, I was also really strong and pretty fast for my position. So, I mean, at the time I was playing linebacker. You knew what you were working with. Oh yeah, it was basically making a bet when I knew that the deal was stacked, that the hand was stacked on my side. So I was, and I never came close. So like there was never a time where anybody in my position was faster than me. Thank God I moved down to defensive tackle my sophomore year. That made it a little bit easier. Yeah. And I was always significantly stronger than everybody else on the team anyway. But that was the case when I started my freshman year as well. I was I was a freak in the weight room, and it was a loaded. It was. I mean, it was.
You knew the card.
It was a very one-sided bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, on that thought, right? Because everyone knows the person who's just a freak athletically. Would you, and you're a humble person, so I'm kind of goading you here, but would you count yourself in that camp? Or was it a combination of, like just hard work, commitment, like what was kind of like setting you apart to that degree from like the other guys at that time?
Yeah. I mean, desire. And I was the weird kid in 8th grade, literally in 8th grade, that, read books on sports psychology and strength and conditioning and then tried to execute them. I didn't necessarily execute them all intelligently, but like what I did know, even starting in like 6th and 7th and 8th grade, was that nobody could outwork me. And I know a lot of people say that, but that was my mantra. Like if I didn't walk out of a workout, and I did this year round, even in season, working out for 2 to 2.5 hours every single day, 90 minutes would have been a short workout. Yeah. And if I wasn't completely flamed at the end of the day, I didn't feel like I worked out hard.
Yep.
And I needed that. I tell people my freakish ability, if you want to call it that, as an athlete, was not my athleticism, but my ability to endure really stupid workouts and not get hurt.
Okay.
And if you can do that and endure that over time and actually keep getting stronger, you're going to have great results. So like, I look at like my high school, like in 8th grade, we only tested bench press until my senior year in high school. Mm-hmm. But I did, as an 8th grader, I benched 225. By the time I was a senior, I did 465. I benched 225 for 42 reps. I squatted 225 for 85 reps. I ran a 4.6, 4.7, 40.
Insane.
But none of that was like, people are like, oh, you're a gift. Like there were guys that were 10 times the natural athlete that I was that didn't have a desire. And one of the things that I always tell people is like, there's a certain minimum threshold of athletic ability that you need to be great.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're 5'2" and you want to play in the NBA, you probably don't have the right gene pool to be great. Okay. Mm-hmm. You can be a great basketball player in your own regard, but not at that level, you're dealing with guys who are, a foot taller or more, who have every bit of the same abilities that you have. Mm-hmm. So it's not saying it's impossible, but it can happen. It's just not likely to happen. I had that minimum threshold of athletic ability in a crap ton of desire. And I didn't know like where it was going to end up. Like I think at some level I wanted to be a professional football player. But I knew that whatever the limit was not because of, at least I wasn't going to make this the excuse.
Yeah.
So I just went as hard as I could. And just kept going hard. And then I got lucky when I got to college. My college track throws coach was really great with programming, and helped me optimize my training in a way that I really didn't get hurt, which I was getting to weights. I mean, when you start going over, 600 or 700 pounds in a squat or 400 or 500 pounds in a bench press, you're starting to push into levels where just being off a little bit can really have a catastrophic injury.
Right. And
he was really good at helping me navigate that and make sure that the focus was really about developing general athleticism. So if I could, squatting 700 pounds was great, but if I couldn't standing broad jump over 10 and a half feet, why the hell do I need to why do I need to squat that heavy?
Yep.
And so that was sort of like the benchmark. Use these tools to influence this, not to get better at these things. So,
right.
Anyway.
No, that's great. And so, it might be hard to put a finger on it, but like, where do you think that internal desire that you have had, it sounds like even from a young age, like where does that come from?
Daddy issues.
Yeah.
And a middle child.
Okay.
Look, it is what it is. Like my brother, and I joke, sort of, it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek kind of remark, but like I was fortunate to have an older brother that was 2 years older, who was kind enough to let me tag along with him everywhere he went with all of his friends, and mean enough to not protect me from them at all times.
Yeah.
So I had to play with kids that were constantly older, more physical than I was. And, that was it. And then the other thing is, I think that there was a lot of personal desire to see, to exceed my dad's expectations or to win his affection. And he worked, 100 hours a week, basically, for most of my life. So the only time that I would see him was at these pinnacle moments in sports. Right. And then you'd have his undivided attention. So, I mean, I haven't really given it a whole lot of thought, but I'm sure that at some level, that certainly was a motivator there. So,
yeah, I think about that too, because a lot of what you're saying resonates, I think, with me personally, but I think probably for a lot of people, they maybe not to the same magnitude. I guess it's unique to everyone, but like that desire, people who are like ultra successful in whatever their own chosen arena is, right? I think that's probably a trait that a lot of those people carry who have made it pretty far. And not to throw myself in the ring with you, but I'm just saying, like, but for me too, it's like, I often wonder, because I have two brothers, and they're both doing incredible things in their own right. But, like I often wonder, like, kind of the determination that I really value, or that drive to just like continually push through, especially when it gets terrible. I'm like, where did that come from? And I think a lot of it was looking at my dad, because he was one of those just work nonstop, perfectionist. If you're not going to do it the right way, don't do it at all. Like one of those types of guys. And so it's like wanting to live up to that expectation. But I'm always curious, to hear what people think. Like, is it something that you were just born with? Was it, something that was circumstantial? Right. It's always interesting, but it's tough to pin down.
Yeah. I look at this and this sort of a nature versus nurture argument. I'll be honest. Like, I'd love to, at some level, there were times in my life where I probably wish I had more overt adversity to face, in my life, so that I could say, well, people, what made you who you are? And I was fortunate, my dad is self-made and, didn't have any options without sports. They opened up every door for him. Otherwise, I'm not sure what he would have been doing. But because of his work, his hard work, and the fact that he met my mom, who's an amazing woman, they were able to provide for us in a way where we have first world problems, as maybe you can relate to, like, it's not that they're not real issues. It's just that when you share them with other people, they don't have that shock value. Like, I woke up this morning and I had to make breakfast from a full pantry, and but the issues are every bit as compelling. And I tell people this all the time. It doesn't matter where you come from; the circumstances dictate the severity of the adversity. Yeah. So for me, like, the adversity that I faced was always probably wanting to win that affection or that moment, that time with my dad. And I probably couldn't have told you that way 30 years ago. Yeah. But at 44, almost 45, like, I can tell you that had a much deeper impact than any kind of other adversity that I might have faced, because the rest of it was more or less self-imposed. So,
yeah, it's interesting, because at the time you can't really see that. For me, like, becoming a parent, it gives you a new perspective, and you can kind of start to like look back and understand, you know what I mean, some of the forces that were at play. But no, I think about this all the time, and I really want to get your opinion on this. So, I came from I'll call it a blue collar family. Like, my dad was brilliant, but he had mental illness issues that would, every couple years, it'd be one step forward, two steps back, and that, I think that was probably my adversity growing up, like trying to fight through that, watch someone that you love so much battle with something kind of out of their control, and with an incredible amount of stigma attached to it. So you can't talk to anyone about it. and so that, I think that was my adversity. And I'm like, now as I get older, I'm like, man, like a lot of the reasons that I operate the way I do for good and bad can relate back to that. But in some ways, and I think this is why football, and it sounds like wrestling, like can be such like a valuable teacher, is because it creates adversity, right? Mm-hmm. And I often think like I've worked very hard, and my wife and I have worked very hard. My parents worked very hard, that I don't have the same adversity that maybe they experienced growing up, right? Like I now have a good job. My kids are comfortable. We have a lot of these first world issues. And in some ways, and people who are really struggling are going to be like, you sound like such an asshole. But I wonder, like, am I robbing them of some of that character building adversity by making their life too easy? Like, do you think about that at all? Because you have, how many kids do you have? We just met your
2 daughters.
2 daughters.
Yeah, I've got 2 daughters.
Do you think about that at all?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. Yeah. I do, but I don't know how it's going to impact them. So at some level, when you have to fabricate adversity or diversity or whatever it is that you're trying, the experiences that you want, that you think are defining moments for kids.
Yeah.
I suppose there's it's hard. I had this conversation with a college buddy of mine in Austin. And, we were talking about Houston before we started as far as the diversity here. And he'd said, he loves Houston, and since college, he'd gone all over the world, and he loved the diversity, like just traveling and the diversity of like Europe and different areas of the world that you just don't have in a lot of areas here in the US. And he said, one of the biggest challenges that we have here they were in Austin, which is a fantastic city, is trying to fabricate diversity. And that's it's like one of those, for him, it was one of those defining moments that's really important for his children to experience.
Yeah.
And they just couldn't do it the right way. And I suppose when we had that conversation, and you can broaden that from diversity to adversity, but, on balance, I think with real adversity, the result is one of 2 extreme options usually.
Yeah.
They can be angels and demons on your shoulders, and whether or not you respond to them positively or negatively is you. I always tell people that my angels can be as powerful a motivator as my demons can. It's my choice. And as kids, I don't think they have the wherewithal to differentiate between how to, negative reinforcement and positive reinforcement in that way, and deal with adversity in that same way that I can as an adult, and was able to do by the time I was probably in my late teens, early 20s.
Yeah.
So I think that the challenge is to create an environment for your children where they have the challenges in front of them, where they have to push themselves. And if there's some diversity or some adversity that falls into the mix, showing them how to work through it. But the importance, I'm kind of rambling here, but
no, I'm with you, and I'm people can't see, but I'm nodding my head. And I kind of subscribe to the thought that, the adversity can be hard work, and that can mean a lot of different things, right? So like if we're talking about sport, like let's call it what it is. Like I live in a really nice suburb, right? And diversity is probably not one of our strengths here. You know what I mean? And then you go and you play a blue collar town in the middle of PA. Like those kids are they're tough. Like this might be a little, what's the word? Stereotypical, but like there's a lot of truth in that, right? Because if you have a huge collection of kids who have had everything handed to them, they never have to work for anything. They can be traditionally soft. But I've also seen people who come from like incredible means, who are incredibly hard workers, and because that work ethic was taught to them and it was expected, right? And so it's like it's always about achieving, I'm going to say, a level of excellence. But I think, for me, it's like, look, I don't want my kids to suffer. I don't want them to go through trying times, right? And I don't think that that's required to create a great person. But like, I'll be damned if they're not going to know that the expectation is like hard work is how you get there. Right. And so I guess that's kind of my thought as to like how I'm going to try and approach it. So, I'm always interested how other, people who have found success in their life, think about that.
Yeah. So I think the thing about it is, to me, is you want to instill that courage in your children to be willing to step in, to paraphrase a familiar quote here, but be willing to step into the arena.
Yeah.
And fail falling forward. That's the real challenge, I think, for people that don't have, and it exists in any environment. It's just that we focus on the people who succeed. Like if you look at anybody that comes from an area that has like just visible adversity, and you see the people that come out of it, you look at them and you're like, man, that's an amazing success story. Absolutely. Right. And for every one of those, there's 5,000 others that didn't make it.
Yeah. I think that's a great point too.
And the flip side of that is coming from, it's not quite as extreme when you don't have that kind of environmental challenge. Mm-hmm. But you're absolutely right. Instilling the work ethic is incredibly important, but the courage to step forward, not because they have to, but because they want to, may actually set them up for greater success than not. Because at some point, the desire, you can force desire because you have to. God, I have to eat today.
Yeah.
And when you can teach kids or show kids, hey, look, you're going to eat today, but you need to do this work. And they start to appreciate that love for the work, the love for the process. And that have that courage to be willing to put themselves out there and always seek continual improvement, no matter what it is that they're pursuing. I think that's the ultimate goal with my kids is, I want to be there to help prevent the catastrophic from happening, but I want to let them fall, learn their own lessons, and ultimately say, you need to get back up and go forward. Because that's the only option you have. And that's sometimes the only victory you have in life is that ability to get back up from your failures.
Yeah. I love that. And I think about it all the time. Like I want my kids to be resilient, because to your point, no matter your circumstance, there's adversity coming. It might be a different degree, but whatever level you're at, like it can feel just as strong. So I think about the resiliency piece all the time. Mm-hmm. And maybe we can transition a little bit talking about, as you're wrapping up college. Well, and actually you guys ended up having a pretty darn good football team at Dartmouth.
We did. Yeah. We ended up going undefeated my senior year and winning the championship, but that was great. Unfortunately, I got hurt with 3 games left in the season and missed the last 3 games of that season. I wish I could say it was on the field, but it was also because I like to challenge this whole notion of what's acceptable social behavior off the field through college. It was a hard lesson to learn and a big price to pay for it.
Yeah.
But,
Yep. Got a couple of those experiences as well. But they make us who we are. So, you said you had aspirations to be a pro football player, and, knowing where you end up, right, you become pretty good, I think, is a conservative way of saying how elite you were at the shot put. At what point, did you make a decision as to which path you wanted to try and go down? Was it a conscious choice, or was it, there was greater opportunities in one avenue than the other?
Yeah, so it was a bit of both. I would say that some of it was again by circumstance, and the other was maybe intentional. I think by the time my senior year had come around, and I really ended up continuing to play football through college because of the commitment that I had made to the team, and some of this desire to please my father. I think, although he would say that was ridiculous. I had my freshman year in football, just a quick segue, is I had like 6 bad concussions, and today they probably would have never let me play past the first one. But back then I remember having, don't remember having, playing in a game at Yale and literally having amnesia for the next 24 hours, and going in for Monday, and they said, "How are you feeling today?" And I said, I'm okay." And they said, "Well, okay, take it easy today and we'll get you back into practice tomorrow." And that was just sort of the gist of it.
That's just how,
And it really
how they did it.
Oh, it shook me to the core. That was the time when Troy Aikman and all the NFL guys were talking about the issues with concussions. And so I was scared to death and wish I'd been more courageous back then and stepped forward and said, I have a real issue. I nearly failed out of school my freshman fall as a result of it.
Oh yeah.
It challenged my ability to do simple math. I could process a lot of things, but if you told me how to take 10 away from 20, I'd have some issues there.
I mean, I remember I had one, not that I had that many, but I had a couple bad ones, and I had one where I couldn't have the lights on. I couldn't read. I couldn't get to the end of the second sentence or remember what the first one was. Like, if you've never had one, whoever's, it's scary because you're like, whoa, I've never really experienced not having my mental faculties before.
When you wake up one morning and you're covered in urine, that's another thing too. It's a pretty scary subject. It's a pretty scary thing, and it's something that you can't really talk about. You certainly, like as an 18-year-old, I wasn't equipped to talk about it.
Well, no one was talking about it. No one was talking about it when I was playing, really. I mean, they were starting to, but no, it's still. I mean, I look at what we were doing then. And I don't think people were being intentionally, what's the word? I don't think people were being intentionally careless. I just think people just didn't understand, players included, like the magnitude of what those things can do. So you're like, I'm tough. I'll play through it. Everyone else is playing.
Yeah. I think there was probably some more research that we weren't privy to at the time, but nobody was really paying attention to the research.
I think you're probably right as well.
It was still, anyway. So my senior year came around and I pretty much finished off my football season out of obligations to like a sense of obligation to my teammates and such. And my college coach had been telling me from the time I got there, his name's Carl Wallen, he'd say, "Adam, you really have a gift. There's something there. You do something different that I've never seen before." And he'd been involved for 30 years. And I don't know how many times he said it, but as you know, the nature of a coach is you have to repeat yourself over and over again until finally that message sinks in. As I tell coaches all the time, it's not that your kids are stupid. Maybe they are, but they're just not ready to listen to you yet.
Yeah, they're just not ready to hear it.
So the secret to being a great coach is always waiting for that moment when the kid actually hears you. And he probably said this, I don't know, maybe 500 times over the course of my college career. And then in this sometime in the fall, it was actually the spring of my senior year, I'd been jacking around socially and he called me into his office and said, "Adam, you really have a talent. You need to stop this stuff." Yeah. And I said, "Okay." I was going through corporate recruiting at the time, which, as you know, coming from Princeton is a pretty big deal in the Ivies. And
if you're one of those kids that the corporation wants. So
I had that perfect balance of athleticism and minimum threshold of academic qualifications.
All about minimum thresholds.
So at least I was getting a lot of first round interviews. I probably screwed it up more often than not. But when they started asking questions about number of potholes or whatever, I just didn't have patience for that crap.
Yeah.
And but I was in a final round interview with a consulting firm towards the middle of the spring. And I remember walking in. It was a death slot for final round interviews at like 4:00 in the afternoon on Friday or something like that. I think they stuck all the people that did. Yeah, it's like the worst possible time.
Right.
So I go in there, and this is in 1997, and so it doesn't predate email, but it predates the convenience of email. So it was still much like waiting at a mailbox. You'd have to sit there and wait for that email to come in, and all of a sudden, boom, it hit, and it'd take 5 minutes for it to download anyway. But the guy that was interviewing me was clearly distracted by something going on back at work, was reading through an email that he just received, was trying to call in, and I literally walked in and said hello. We sat down, and I was waiting for about 2 minutes while he finished up a call. And I don't know what happened. I had every intent of completing that interview and then making a decision at the back end of that conversation to go to New York and do a consulting or banking job or trading job, whichever one I wanted, whichever one I received. And I was sitting there for like 2 minutes while I was finishing up his call, and I said, I don't want to be here. And I looked at, and this whole conversation with my college coach, these conversations over the years kind of mounted up, and I was like, wow. And so he got off his call, and I looked him over. I looked at him and said, hi, I want to say thank you for taking the time to meet with me. You're clearly distracted. I'll be very honest and respectful of your time. I don't really want to be here. I said, thank you very much. I shook his hand, and I got up and I walked out.
Awesome.
And I went straight to my college track coach's office, and I said, so I have a gift, you keep saying. How does this work? And we started setting up a game plan for training for the 2000 Olympics at that moment.
That's awesome. And what about what year would this be?
That was 1997.
Okay. See, I love that, because one of the things I'm finding, like, we just had one with my buddy Kareem, who is an Olympic hopeful himself. And I mean, he'd been out of basketball for 3 years, working at a public radio station, just gotten promoted to hosting his own radio show, and just had this feeling. He was like, man, he was like, I thought this is what I wanted. He's like, but I don't want to be here. He's like, I have more in the tank. And it sounds like, I don't want to jump ahead, but like, you took a similar risk or bet rather, like on yourself, that probably at the time didn't look like the logical, safe choice. Is that fair to say?
Do you remember, yeah. Do you remember that? Do you remember me saying I didn't want to go to a school that had athletic scholarships for a reason?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the downside of that is paying for a school like Dartmouth. And so I remember calling my parents and having this conversation with my mom and dad and saying, look, just done my last corporate recruiting interview. Great. How'd it go? Mm-hmm. It was good. Went well. Do you think you get the job? I said, no, I don't think so. And I've got to talk to you about something else.
Yeah.
I know that y'all just spent whatever it was on Dartmouth, $200,000 or whatever it is for me to come to school here. And I know I turned down a lot of athletic scholarships to do that. But I want to train for the 2000 Olympics. And to do that, I'm going to move out to California and train with a coach at Stanford. And I don't know what I'm going to do for work yet. And yeah.
How was that received?
My dad started laughing.
Okay.
And he said something like, in tongue in cheek, I think he said something like, you jerk. And he said, well, they both said, well, we'll support you in any way possible. We understand that this is a short-term, ambition here or opportunity. Right. So they all understood, and this is at some level as a parent, this is the opportunity I want to provide my kids is, look, if you've got a dream that you are convinced you can make a reality, and I need to find a way to subsidize that dream, then I want you to know that we are there for you. Yeah. And so I ended up packing up my car, driving out to California. There's a funny side story is I had $200 cash to my name at the time. And I was like, I had to, driving from New Hampshire to the Bay Area is not a short drive. And I did it in 3.5 days. Okay. And I was driving like 15 or 17 hours every single day. And the end of the third day, I ended up, I just couldn't go any farther. And I was beat. And I ended up, I stopped just outside of Reno because that was like the last place I could get. Otherwise you go into this vast nowhere between Reno and in the Bay Area.
I've made that drive a couple times. So I pull into Boomtown Casino, which is on the west side of Reno. And I'm like, it's like 11:30 and I'd been on the road since like 4:30 that morning. Right.
literally, I think I started at Chicago, just outside of Chicago that day. I mean, it was like a crazy long drive.
A lot of time.
Actually, I may have been in
a lot of time for self-reflection.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I listened to War and Peace on tape. It was fantastic. And so I literally actually did. I did listen to War and Peace on tape across that. Yeah. And so I get to Boomtown. Like, I've got $200 cash. I need some food.
Right.
And I check into the hotel room and I go looking for food and I can't find food anywhere. Mm-hmm. And I'd never been to a casino in my life at that point. And so I'm like, well, at least I can get them to bring me some food and drinks. If I go sit down at this blackjack table, I know how to do that.
Yeah.
You know, I can play blackjack, right?
Yeah.
So it's like getting close to 12 o'clock at night. And I have $200 cash. And, you know, wisely put all $200 into chips. That's what you do when you don't. Anyway.
Yep.
And
courage is a theme here.
Lose to my last $5 in about 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the crap? I'm like, well, I'm going all in now.
Yep.
2.5 hours later, I walk out with $1,700 in my name, somewhere around there. And that was how I paid for my first summer in California.
That's amazing. See, it's stories. My wife's always like, why can't you walk away from the blackjack table? And it's like, because you don't understand. Adam had $5 and walked away with $1,700.
At the time, this is 1997. Like,
inflation.
What sort of return on your investment can you do with that time? 2.5 hours? Come on.
Oh, that's so awesome. I love stories like that.
And of course, that seeded my degenerate gambler phase as well, because I figured every time I'd step it down to the table, that's exactly what would happen.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, but you know what? It's exactly what you were saying earlier, and not about the blackjack, but like you taking this risk. It's like you want your kids to have the courage to do that. And I think about that all the time too. And, you know, like, quite frankly, like, there's some times in my life where, like, I wish I would have made the courageous choice and didn't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And maybe I spent a couple years just kind of like, oh man, what was I doing? Like, why didn't I take that chance? So I love to hear that you took that chance. And like, it sounds like, whether you think about it in those terms, at least when I hear it back, it's like, you know, you want to inspire your kids to like make that same courageous, like, risk on themselves if and when they have the opportunity.
I probably won't let it. I probably say that don't do that in the casino, but
yeah, please, no, conservative in the casino.
I've since learned that was an anomaly. Like, that literally was like winning the lottery, and you just don't want to bet on that happening.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Yeah, we're gonna do a whole nother podcast on blackjack. And all the trials and tribulations. Okay, so you get out to San Francisco, and how are you doing on time? I know we're over an hour. Are you good? Okay.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, you let me know. I want to be respectful of your time. Let me know if you need to drop. So you get out to San Francisco. So you're start training for the Olympics. Mm-hmm. And in college, you were a national champion, correct? In the shot put. Mm-hmm. Okay, so like, clearly you have what it takes. Well,
I timed it well.
You timed it well. Okay, tell me about that. What do you mean you timed it well?
So 2 years before, John Godina set the national college record, which still stands, I believe. It's 72 feet 2 inches. Then the following year, Andy Bloom won with
still stands?
Yeah, oh yeah. I think there's been a couple really close outdoors, but nobody's ever broken. I don't think they may have broken. It may have happened recently, but
that's insane.
It stood for a long time.
Wow.
And then the next year, Andy Bloom won with like a throw of like 68 feet or something like that. And then I ended up winning with 64 feet. And then the next year they won. The next year they bumped back up to like 67 feet. So
no kidding.
Minimum threshold, man.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, there's something.
Right place, minimum threshold.
Exactly.
All you got to do, kids. Exactly. Listen up. So that's incredible. Okay. So then, like, this idea then of training for the Olympics, like, did you feel like there actually was more risk than maybe I assumed in hearing your story? Like, did you feel like there was obviously a lot of hard work ahead of you, but like, did you feel like you had a lot of ground to make up to get to that level?
Yeah, I mean but you rationalize things differently, right? So everybody else from the outside probably had a more honest perspective on it and more accurate perspective. But my perspective was this: is that I'd always been a multi-sport athlete,
Right.
and I never really focused on developing my ability to throw.
Yeah.
And I felt that I could compete with those guys, and didn't just feel that way; like genuinely believed it. So, but from other people outside looking in, I can tell you that all those people said, this is freaking nuts. What the hell are you doing? And I'm like, well, the only thing I'm going to lose right now is 3 years.
Okay.
So I just looked at it like this, like for the next 3 years of my life, I'm going to focus on training for the 2000 Olympics. And if I make it, fantastic. And if I don't, I've got a story to tell people. And says, look, I delayed my college career or delayed my post-collegiate professional career so that I could pursue. And so I just thought of it as like, look, there's really no lose situation for me.
Yeah.
At some level, you can spin it into a way where like, hey, he's got the courage to dream big and bet the ranch and go for it. And if it doesn't work out, he deals with those consequences. And that's the way I was looking at it. So
Love that.
So was it easy the whole time? No, like God, you have doubts all the time. That's part of it. If you're not doubting yourself, then you're probably not doing big enough things. I hate the term dream. I hate it. Dreams are figments of your imagination. Yeah.
So what do you think? How do you position it instead?
So, it's
is
funny.
Is it about goals?
Yes. I mean, at some level, I came up with a term a couple of years ago because people always talk about Olympic hopeful. Yeah. And I don't think that's what it is. Hopes and dreams are figments of the imaginations. They can seed a thought, but they don't force you to take action on it. And so what I always think about is like, what's the difference between men and women of action and men and women of thought? Well, it's faith. You've got to have that resolve that you can push through this. And sometimes that's a big leap of faith. So and not to get spiritual or religious or anything like that, but I've since changed my nomenclature from Olympic hopeful to Olympic faithful because it's hope of, faith is hope put into action, if you will. And what I've found is that if I set a goal, an objective, and it means the right thing to me. Like my desire is great enough to achieve it. I can move heaven and earth to get there. And that's not something that I can do if all I do is hope for it. I've got to put that into action. You see this all the time. With people, God, like there's a lot of hopeful things that people do, like going to buy a lottery ticket. That's hope. That's the worst form of it. That's desperation, right? Like I say that as someone who likes to buy lottery tickets, but that's besides the point. There's a calculator. When it goes over $160 million, I know that spending $1 on that is actually mathematically worth it. So
I'm with you. Yeah.
But so there you go. But my point is, I guess my point is like at that point I was naive, ignorant, and passionate enough to put my hope into action and become a faithful person. So people would ask me, what am I doing? I'm training for the 2000 Olympics. Well, how good are you? Well, they take the top 3 in the world or take the top 3 from the United States. What rank are you? About number 9. How hard is it to get into the top 3? Well, I've got to improve about 8 feet to do that. Is that a lot? Yes.
It's a lot.
Like, you can't let your dreams don't need to blind you from the truth either. So I just confronted that every single day, and I'd look at ways to spin it the other way. Like, and people are like, well, aren't you kind of small for a shot putter? Yes. But I'm strong and athletic, and I believe I can do more. Why? Because I've seen it in myself. Yeah. And, I can't tell you how many people asked me why I was doing this, or said, you're not good enough. And if you base your actions off what people, and then you got to have some dose of reality every now and then, but if you base your actions in your dreams, if you will, the bigger goals that you set for yourself off of what other people tell you can and can't do, you're never going to achieve. You're destined to just do a life of mediocrity. That's just what it is. Like, here you are, because this is where society wants you. But if you want to be an overachiever right here, you look at across any field out there, and I don't care if it's athletics, academics, professional, for-profit, nonprofit, the people that are in the top 1%, they may have had that opportunity because of their birthright, but they are not staying there.
I completely agree.
So, you've got to, you can't make the excuses or listen to those people that then bring you back down to where this is. Because the one thing I've learned about this culture is that while we love to see that outlier break out, we also love to see them fall from grace, and there's just a sense of jealousy, this collective jealousy or envy, or it's a negative thing that says, no, this is where everybody belongs. And if you go above this level, it's because you worked the system, you cheated. It's not because I work hard and this is where I'm at. No, screw that.
Man, no, anyway. I completely agree. And I remember even, not to make this about my own college career, but I had there were Pac-12 schools coming to my high school. And I remember it was my senior year, and I think Washington State had just come or something. And a buddy of mine was in gym class at the time, saw the coach, and he walks over to me in the next period. He's like, "Hey, dude, I just saw Washington State was here." I was like, "Oh, it's awesome." I was like, "It's great." He's like, "But you're not really that good, are you?" He's like, "You're not actually that good enough to go play there, are you?" And I was like, "Yeah, dude, I fucking am." Like, what do you know what I mean? But that was one of my, not my first, but it's a lasting experience of there's very few people who will see that and be genuinely excited for you and try and help further you along towards that achievement. There's a lot of people will be like, "Oh man, someone's about to do something special." And it makes me uncomfortable with the level that I'm at currently. And people, you're right. You gotta double down on yourself. And that's what I'm hearing from you. And I love it.
Well, when you see someone succeed that you see as a peer, and you look at them and you say, what does he have that I don't have? It's only the intangibles. There's no other excuse that you can make. So you look at it and you say, oh, well, I could have done that if I wanted to.
Right.
And that's a really bad place to live. We set up guardrails, and I tell people that if you really want to live life, you got to get out on the edge of the guardrail. You don't want to go too far over because that's catastrophic, right? But nothing really great in life happens straight down the center. It's always on the periphery. So you've got to be pushing out and widening out those guardrails all the time. And if you know this as well as I do, but how many people? So this is the interesting thing. So I've been out of college now for a long time, over 20 years. And I had these conversations with guys that on every other metric that most people would evaluate are some of the most successful people on the planet. Their net worth is in the whatever you want to put a number on it. Literally as higher than you can count. And they lead they're captains of industry, and they have these all this stuff. And you ask them what they want to do, and in their 40s now, and this is part of sort of reflective of midlife crisis age, but they want to do what they couldn't do when they were 20 and 22. They want to relive that ability to go out and compete or go out and whatever. And now they're in a position when they can do it because there's nothing. It's always, so it's interesting to me. I had this one conversation, and I'll never forget it. I was at a buddy of mine's wedding, and we were in the car driving. It's a beautiful wedding in California. Oh, gosh, where was it exactly? St. Louis. And we were out in we were actually in the mountains inland from there on this beautiful ranch, and we're driving back, and I've got literally, it's like one guy had started a biotech company. The other one was a top salesperson for a big tech company. And the other one was a commercial real estate developer in Vail. And we were talking about the 2016 Olympics. I think it was.
That's quite a car. Sorry. Yourself, so Olympic gold medalist. It's just geez.
It's a bad joke, right? So, I was an Olympic gold medalist at this time. This was in 2012 before the Olympics.
Okay.
And I said, they were asking what I was going to do. I said, guys, I've got a job offer that it really checks a lot of boxes at the time. And if it pans out, I'm probably going to take it. And they were like, oh man, you can't do that. You're so close. I mean, you're still the number one thrower in the world. And you got this opportunity to go to 2012 and we'd do that if we were in. I said, guys, you know, you wouldn't. And they're like, yeah, we definitely would. And I'm looking around this car and I said, okay, guys, let's just have this real conversation because you're talking to me about my, challenging my commitment was where they were going. I said, first of all, I've accomplished everything I need to in this sport. Second of all, I've sacrificed a lot to do it. And those sacrifices, I don't think anything about, but it's financial stability for my family. It's my post-athletic career, which is probably going to last longer than my athletic career, I hope. And some of these other things. I said, so I've got to look for the opportunity that I can get, that I can go on to from here. And they said, well, if we were in your situation, we'd double down for one more year. And I looked at them and I said, guys, look, I have a wife and 2 kids. And I'm going to ask you a question. If you want to answer this honestly, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine too. I said, how much money did you make last month? And they all kind of went quiet. I said, I made $32,000 last year because I got hurt at the exact wrong time. And I'm okay gambling and risking it all when I'm the one that has to pay the price. I've done it multiple times throughout my whole career. And on balance, it's worked out okay. Yeah. But I can't ask my wife and kids to risk that kind of, to take those kinds of risks year after year after year after year, when the payout is not like the only time you actually have an opportunity to monetize this career in any meaningful way happens once every 4 years and is still only it's still, even if you win, it's not going to be something like you're playing baseball or football or basketball where you sign this, $12 million a year contract. It's strictly a labor of love. And as long as I focus on that, I can do that. But at some point, the dollars and cents of this have to add up. And I'm getting to the point now where those dollars and cents are flipping the perspective. So it was a hard thing for me to go through because for the balance of my career, like when I went from an amateur to a professional and I was doing this really full time, I was focusing on the wrong things. I started evaluating my worth as based off how much money I was making relative to other athletes in my sport. And that was really, really hard. And I felt like I was a mile wide and an inch deep. I started focusing on like, okay, well, this is what I need. This is best for my career. It's best for my career. And I said, screw it. I said, the career opportunity here is not about how much money I make, because if I wanted to do that, I would have gone and played professional football. Even just being on a travel squad and not playing at all was still going to be more financially worthwhile than throwing a shot put. So this was strictly because I wanted to do it and I love to do it. And we talked about this briefly. It's like there's two different motivators. There's angels and demons. I associate that, differentiate between them. Angels is they motivate from a place of love, and demons, they motivate from a negative place. Anger, right? And both can be very influential in your ability to conquer, challenge, and attack them and go and motivate you, right? And so I realized as I started focusing on money that like neither of those motivators were in these two categories. Like money was just didn't really motivate me because the money wasn't enough, I guess. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't the thing that motivated me to do this. So I had to find a deeper reason. So 2004 happens. 2004 Olympics, I actually got silver at the time in a tiebreak. We can come back to this, and I know we're running long.
I can go all day. I want to be, as long as you're good. Let's keep going. This is so interesting.
I'm good. So what ended up happening after the 2004 Olympics was my sponsor basically said to me, "You're old, and we don't value you."
Are you even 30 by this point yet?
2004, I was 29 at the time.
You're old.
So and it didn't say it. It got personal real quick. And so what ended up happening was the money that I made from the sport, at least from the institutional side of the sport, was removed. And the only reason for me to do this was a personal challenge.
And this is right after 2004.
And so
Wow.
right after 2004. And so every single day, like I woke up with such anger. I was angry. Angry. And I mean, like I was a miserable person to be around, but damn it, if I didn't have the greatest workouts ever, because anger is for me, it's a short-term emotion. I can't, it's very powerful, probably the most powerful motivator you'll ever have. But for me, it's a short-term emotion. If it becomes a long-term thing, you become a really bad person. And so, but my anger shifted at some point, like instead of like, screw those people, I'm doing this because of them out of spite and anger and frustration, all that stuff. And reminded me why I was doing this in the first place, which is because I just love the personal challenge. And when that shift happened, I never had an issue with motivation or valuing my own personal self-worth or anything like that. It was like, I am doing what I want to do and what I love to do. And damn it, if I do it well enough, the external rewards that I receive are going to be enough for me to survive and be happy. And it wasn't until later when you're not winning championships on a regular basis, then the finances start to play the limiting factor. But I was like, it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Was reminding me about what's the strongest motivator for me and why I really do things, which is those internal motivations.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point that, because some people, I don't even know if people argue about this, but it's important to differentiate that like anger is a powerful motivator, right? Like that chip on your shoulder can take you a long way. But I love the thought of it as like, look, it's got to be short term, because if you let that be your only consistent driving force, to your point, like it's negativity driving you, and like that can't help kind of permeate out to the other aspects of your life and kind of like who you are as a person. So I love that, like, you can even like just pinpoint. So, matter of factly, like there was a switch that took place that was able to like carry you through. I mean, how 2004, and you competed up until 2012, right? That's another 8 years. Like that's incredible. Oh man. So that's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah. And when that motivation clicks, or when that you just revel in all the moments that you get after that. And it really is true. Like every time I was out there competing, you could never find me happier. Like it was just, or training even. That became, that's what I needed every day to really fulfill myself. And with the results, like, in the Olympic sports, Pierre de Coubertin, who was the founder of the modern Olympics, stressed the importance of the struggle. Those times in between Olympic games or competitions when nobody's watching, and over the end result. And to me, I think this is a message that has really resonated throughout my whole career, and one that I hope to continue to espouse as I go forward. It's just that the results that you earn, they don't happen when everybody's watching all the time. And the only victories that you're really guaranteed are those little victories along the way. You woke up this morning, you're able to put your shoes on, you're able to kiss your kids, all those things that we take for granted as part of our daily process. But the ability to adhere to that process over a long period of time is what yields the big results when everybody is watching. And if you're lucky enough, this is where chance comes into play. The stars will align, you've put in all the right work, and you show up on the moment when it really matters, and you're able to perform at a level that gives you the big professional public award. But on balance, like, the least gratifying times of my whole career were the major championships. And I know that sounds weird, but like, there's so much pageantry involved, and you do those for everybody else. That's just the capstone to that's the proof that you have to hold up. And we're in the process of moving, so I don't have anything out right now, but like, those are the things that you show to validate that you were actually good once. But to me, like, most of my medals have always been kept in my sock drawer. Because that's not why I did it. I mean, that may have been the first reason why I took a step in that direction, but you don't get those opportunities, and they don't happen every day. And like money, it's never enough. And if you only live for those moments, God, man, it only happens once every 4 years. So you're just not going to live ever.
Yeah.
At least not in my sport. So,
yeah. So, it's that thought again of like this is, I'm sure, a cliche, which I'll somehow find a way to butcher, but like this idea that like the process, or it's the journey, or trust the process, right? Like it's the process that you really need to be in love with long-term, to continue to like have success at a high level. And that's something that I think I do try and think about a lot. So, I've kind of ramped back up my own athletic training over the last 2-3 years, and we don't need to go into that, but I did it because I was like, man, like I just used to love doing this. Like I was happier when I did it. I felt better. I had more confidence. I felt like that bled over to all these other parts of my life where I thought clear, there's all these positive benefits. Like, no, I'm not in the NFL right now, but like, why does that have to stop me from doing something that I loved and that I know made me an overall better person? So in my own life, right now, even though I'm not really competing in anything, I do this decathlon once a year, which is a fantastic cause, but it's for the process. Like I do it because it makes me feel fulfilled on a daily level. I enjoy it. I know I've talked about my kids a lot on this podcast, but I also do think there's a huge benefit in letting your kids see you demonstrate work ethic and what it looks like to work hard and be passionate about something. And that I think about that all the time. I try and keep them around when I'm doing my gym workouts when I can, because I think it's important for them to see it. But yeah, it's falling in love with the process. I think once you make that shift, you're so much more happy, fulfilled, right? So what
your expectations are less, right? What's my expectation for today? My expectation for today is the grind. And if I do really well, I'm going to be stronger. I may not be able to measure it today, but at some point in the future, the day of reckoning is going to happen, and I'm going to be ready for it. And maybe that's the structure. That's the thing that we love about sports, right? Is it gives us that structure to have that day of reckoning. So.
Absolutely. So we touched on the 2004 Olympics, and I know it's a crazy story, so I will let you tell that. But one of the things I want to ask you, because world championships, Olympic finals, right? Like in an individual sport, I can't even imagine what that type of pressure is like. Can you describe a little bit? And I think here's why I'm asking. I'll tell you why I'm asking before I ask the question, right? Everyone in their own life has moments that at that time feels like a really big moment. Like it's critical for some reason, right? And anxiety comes in, stress, nerves, right? Like you've done it at the pinnacle of the athletic level. Like what was your mindset like, or what did you do to get yourself in a state where you were ready, to give like a peak performance?
It's all about preparation. The first time you go to the next level, there's this thought that there's something different about it, the unknowns. And I'll be honest, and I know people say this all the time, there's nothing different about stepping into the ring, stepping onto the playing field in a Super Bowl or Olympic Games as there is, what you do on a daily basis. Maybe the stakes are a little bit higher, but that's all external. It's the externalities of everything are different. The context is a little bit different, but once you're in the moment, it's the same thing. And I think what a lot of people don't do outside of sports is prepare for that mentally. So, and I referenced this earlier on, but I was that weird kid that in 8th grade read, sports psychology books. And we focus on the physical effort and the physical preparation, but really at the next level, it's who can prepare for it the best mentally. And what I found was and it's easier to do in sports because you can really get a visual, like a really good visual of what your competitive environment's going to look like, regardless of where it's at. But I spent a lot of time actually doing the mental preparation, the visualization, and taking another step further with different forms of sports hypnotherapy and
Interesting.
Oh yeah, I told you I was a weird kid like that. To me, like the physical differences, I mean, okay, most of the guys I competed against were physically larger, but there's nothing I could do to change about that. Like that is what it is. But what I could always change was my mindset and my approach to every competition. The first Olympics I went to in 2000, I think I was probably young and stupid enough to not necessarily appreciate the gravity of the moment. So I was actually able to execute it a little bit better, not by any, just more out of sheer circumstance than intent. But I think the big thing that people lack in their day-to-day challenges is the ability to sit down and prepare mentally for the challenges that lay ahead. There's an escalating degree of intensity, right? So if you're doing entry level work at a job and you have say a big presentation, whatever that sort of benchmark thing is, you spend all this time preparing the information, but how much time do you spend preparing the presentation? And so with sports, I spent a lot of time preparing my body, but I was also that kid that also spent a lot of time preparing for the actual competition. And there's a difference between that. So you have to be able to walk through if for me, because I do suffer from probably from some sort of performance anxieties and fears and stuff like that, I have to prepare that way. Otherwise I'll just get too worked up and it won't be effective. So it starts months out where I start visualizing the process of what it takes to be there. And then I develop a character of who is that championship, who's my superhuman version of myself. It sounds all kind of weird and funky, right?
I'll jump in later, but I'm super interested in this. But yeah, go on, please.
So, I mean, my process for it was developing a character and then over time adding so much detail to that character that eventually I stepped into that character's shoes. And by the time I got to the championship event, I could trigger that character like that. And I was that person. And that's how I would get into the zone, if you will. And people are like, well, how do you do that? How do you maintain this level of intensity when you compete? I'm like, I prepare for it. And it's the same thing when you're doing, it's harder to do, I think, outside of sports because you don't have those types of moments like that. But when you talk, again, shifting back to professionals outside of the sports world, if you talk to someone like a Steve Jobs type character back in, obviously before he passed, I would be willing to bet he spent a ton of time developing and refining and looking at every single aspect of his annual meetings presentation. Right. And I bet he drove people batshit crazy with the level of detail that he would get into that. I'm going to step here and this is going to happen. I'm going to say this and I'm going to point this way and this is going to happen. That's what I would do. And people are like, well, isn't that overkill? I'm like, yeah, but the difference between winning and losing is less than a centimeter in a lot of these competitions. So we're talking about this much. So if it gives me even just a little bit more, then it's worthwhile because those are the ones that really matter. And those are the ones you can't it's.
No, it's so this is something that I was introduced to in high school. Do you know, Moad Consulting, John Jomad, man, I'll look it up, but now his son has taken over the business and he works with Russell Wilson, Alabama. He's one of the premier, sports psychologist in the country. And I've read about him a couple different times. And I was just looking him up the other day and I put two and two together that his dad lived in the Western Washington area. And he came and spoke at my school. I must have been a sophomore. And he gave us a speech on visualization. And I remember being like, oh, wow, this is really interesting. And I remember we played in the spring league basketball tournament up at Skagit Valley Community College for all those Western Washington people listening. And I remember I was like, let me give this a shot. It's about a 45-minute drive from my house to the gym. I'm going to sit in the back and I'm just going to visualize. And I would do it every week. And I would visualize specific plays happening. I'd be on the perimeter. I'd be playing defense and the point guard comes down and he goes to pass it to the guy on the wing. And I see it happen quick and I break on it and I tip it and I going in, I lay it up, whatever. And I was like, let me just commit to this and try it. And I mean, sure enough, even in something as unpredictable in a lot of ways as basketball, those moments would occur. And I would make the step quicker. I would break in on that pass. I would hit that three coming off the screen. And I was just blown away at like how just something like that could actually come to fruition. And I wish I would have done more of it in college. I did when I moved to running back. I would sit in my room and I would visualize the play. I would visualize the linebacker coming into the hole and what I would do. But it's crazy because even in something as unpredictable, like I said, as those sports, I've seen it for myself where those moments happen and you're able to act quicker. And I imagine something like shot put where the parameters are a little bit more controlled, right? Like the ring's always the same size, the ball's always the same weight. Like I could just imagine how much you could get into that, like that vision you'd created. It's so cool. I love that. I love that you did that, or to hear that, you were doing that.
Oh yeah.
What was like the sports hypnotherapy that you were talking about? Is that something you did in your later career too?
And so, no, I started this. Well, I guess it was later in some ways. I started working with a really high level strength and conditioning coach, a guy named Charles Poliquin, who passed away a few years ago. But a guy named Charles Poliquin in 2003. And so in life, you reach a certain level of expertise and then you start looking around for new answers and everything around you is dark because you just don't know which direction to go to. And so I met Charles and he was like this light giver, if you will. He pointed at that light and said, hey, look, this is how we're going to restructure your strength and conditioning. And by the way, it doesn't stop there. We have to work on your nutrition. And by the way, it doesn't stop there. You have to work on your sleep habits. And by the way, it doesn't stop there. We have to work on optimizing your brain, which was actually offsetting some of the damage that the concussions did. And by the way, we're not just going to stop there. We're going to go to mindset as well. And so he had this really holistic approach to how he helped develop me as an athlete in a much like there's no way it would have taken me, generations to harness and learn and all this information that he had. He was just a wealth of knowledge. And for some reason he really liked me as well. And just basically said, look, I want to help you in this process. And so he started like, when you're on the frontier, the edge of what people say is conventional wisdom or knowledge, and you're starting to look for other things and really challenge really convention. Everything you do out there, people are going to criticize. That's stupid. You're dumb. God, why would you do that? And so Charles was that kind of crazy. And so sometimes you kind of had to reel him back a little bit, but he introduced me to this guy who was a sports hypnotherapist who also has passed away. But the guy was, and I like certifiably batshit crazy. And so his name was Pete Siegel. And I met him on a trip. I would go out and train with Charles once a month out in Arizona, and we'd do all sorts of testing, and then he'd write up a new workout, give me a new nutrition plan. And then we worked through some other areas, and I talked to him probably weekly, several times a week. And he hooked me up with Pete. And so Pete had no lack of confidence, I will say that. And he would walk in and say, I can make you better. And, when you're looking for, that much, when people say they can make you better, you at least you want to hear what they have to say. So this is what I do. It's NLP, so neuro-linguistic programming. I work with sort of sports psychology, but sports psychology is a passive kind of thing. Visualization is a little bit more active, and NLP and the way that I implement sports hypnosis or hypnosis is very active. I said, okay, let's try this. So I'm the first sessions we did were over the phone, and he'd say, I need you to find a place where, if you got a headset, wear a headset. This is 2003. So we didn't have all these little, great little plugins that we could do. And so I'd put the phone on speaker, lay down on my bed, and have had this guy who, honestly, like, he was shaved head or balding and a beard, and he kind of looked like Danny DeVito in terms of his body style, a little more powerful, like stocky, stocky, power, more like he definitely worked out, but yes, and so and then he'd take you through this whole process, and it would literally be painting the picture of what your superhuman version of yourself would look like. And it was an iterative process in each one. And it always culminated with you yelling your keyword, that trigger word, and locking it into that. And then when you were working with him in person, there was a physical touch. So there was a tactical response. So he'd tap you on the head, or he'd slap you on the shoulder, and you'd just be in this trance-like state. And I can get into those states pretty easy. And so this was something that really worked for me. And but my wife thought I was batshit crazy. She would be like, "What the hell is going on in there?" And then we'd do this in hotel rooms, and I'd have to call down to the front desk and be like, "Look, I just want to say you're going to hear yelling and screaming from my room. Everything is okay. Please don't interrupt." And so whenever I knew I was going to work with him and I was traveling, I would always request a hotel room that was as far away from the elevator as possible, and hopefully on a corner, because it would get so loud. And they have video of this, by the way. You can actually, I hate to even say it, but you can YouTube it. He put it on YouTube. He's like, "Do you care if I put it?" I said, "I don't care."
We'll check this out.
But he would do all this stuff with sound as well. He'd get this when he'd play this like psychedelic sort of mix of techno music, all over the place. And anyway, and then it would peak and anyway, it was very choreographed and but it was effective. I didn't work with him for a whole lot of years in a row, but I worked with him for about 13 months leading up to the 2004 Olympics. And then a couple times after that, but it taught me the process. We kept up for the rest of his life there, but it was I found ways to adapt that and put it into a context that I was more comfortable with on a more regular basis, and that I could actually do on my own, which to me, sustainability is a big part of these treatments. But that's kind of how that whole thing worked.
That's awesome.
And I mean, if you talk about NLP back in the early part of 2000, you're basically only talking about that weird sort of Tony Robbins kind of people, right? Oh man, you guys are weird. Y'all are kind of cultish. So now it's a little bit more accepted, and visualization, stuff like that, is a little bit more accepted. And the active visualization, as some people refer to it, is more accepted. And now you got the mindset people and the mindfulness people and all that stuff. So, but 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. And I remember people be like my competitors be like, you're weird, dude. I'm like,
but did you see how far I threw it? Give me a little of that weird. Oh man. See, that's awesome. I was just going to say something. That's okay. So, that's incredible. What for you, right? And I know that we probably should wrap this up, because I know there's people trying to pull you out of the room. You've been at it for a little while. For you, what excites you now? As someone who's competed at the highest level multiple times, right? What's getting you excited today? Whether it be from a fitness standpoint, whether it be from a professional standpoint, what is your process that you're currently in today?
Oh, that's a great question. I wish I had a good answer for it. I'm still figuring it out. And I think that's the whole thing right now, is when you lose the structure of sports. And I think this is the one thing that the D10 did really well, is give people back some structure of sports, in a purpose, or not even a purpose, a framework to train.
I totally agree with that.
So now it comes down to what do I really enjoy in life? Well, I love sports. I love developing kids. I love developing athletes of all levels. And I also still want to compete myself. And I haven't figured out where I'm going to direct my competitive desires.
Your wife's probably hoping not MMA. I would imagine.
No. Definitely not MMA. Look, I've had this great opportunity. I had this opportunity to do some pad work with this guy. I told you about him earlier, but he's a former heavyweight champion in boxing. And I got into the ring with him, and he was like, "Okay, just go ahead and do this." And I said, "Well, okay." And he's basically making fun of me, not in a nice way. He's like, "Hey, like, don't worry about it. You're not going to hit me. Just throw." I'm like, "Okay." And so we're going through this work, and I'm hitting, and I just started to laugh. And he said, "What are you laughing at?" I said, "I'm almost 100% certain that even if I really wanted to hit you,
wouldn't be able to.
It wouldn't happen." He's like, "Yeah, you're pretty predictable." But yeah.
He's like, "Yeah, I was the best in the world at this at one point."
So it's like people getting like big, strong guys saying they can throw the shot put far. Sure.
Right.
You can. Yeah, go for it. No, but definitely not MMA. I learned a long time ago that's not where, while I enjoyed wrestling and all that stuff, that's a hard way to make a living.
And I love it. I love watching it, but yeah, so much respect for what those guys put themselves through.
Yeah. I think my next round will be something, I'd probably be track and field based.
Yeah.
There's something about track, the pure fundamentals of sports, running, jumping, and throwing that I really enjoy. And maybe I'll never be a golfer. But I'd like to find something else that I could do with other people. But at the end of the day, too, I really enjoy it. Like, my experiences with the D10, one of the things that, as you know, Dave does is work out with people on a regular basis. And I think to me, that's one of the things that I really miss about working out with teams and things like that is, it's not just the competitions that you build those relationships, it's the practices that you go to. And your body just gets primed for building relationships when those endorphins are kicking and you're pushing yourself, through some sort of threshold during the course of that workout. So I think in the short term, I'm probably just going to have fun working out and meeting a bunch of people as I move to my next gig here. But I think over the long term, I'll have to find a way to channel my own competitive interest into something. I'm just not quite there yet.
No, I can imagine. I mean, even just for myself, the transition from college to like professional, focus, the structure. And it's like when you have it, for me, I guess it was 23 years. But when it feels like your whole life has been building towards one objective and all of a sudden that objective is no longer really on the table. Kind of like, well, what do I do? And then we could have a whole show about like your identity being tied up as being an athlete or whatever you were. But yeah, I sputtered for like 3 years, maybe longer in reality. Just trying to figure out like, what is that next thing that I'm going to go after with that same intensity? So I can't wait to see what you do next. And I'm sure there will be no shortage of people in Atlanta who are going to want to work out with you and learn from you in some capacity.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, Ken. If you ever make it that way, please don't hesitate. This has been a real
I absolutely
pleasure,
will. I absolutely will. And actually, on that note, for people who want to follow what you're doing, where should I direct them?
So there's two places. One, I'll be at the Lovett School in Atlanta,
Awesome.
Which I imagine that everything will be made. I don't know what my email address will be there, but I'm sure it's public when it does happen. And then two, I'm on Instagram and I suppose Twitter, although I don't spend much time on Twitter anymore. But Adam Nelson 5376 is my Instagram handle, and only 5376 because I didn't know what Instagram was doing when I created the account.
You didn't know it'd follow you forever. No. Yeah, no, I got you. Well, awesome. So I'll link to that in the show notes, and that way people can catch up with what you're doing today. But thank you, man. This has been such a great conversation. I really appreciate it. And we'll be in touch, and maybe we'll get you back in the future.
Sounds good, Ken. I appreciate you, man.